Mr. Beacon podcast is sponsored by Williot.
Welcome to the Mr. Beacon podcast, the show for solution designers at the intersection of the digital and the physical. I am really pleased this week to have Lucas Hanson on the show from Cisco. Lucas, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I'm super excited to be here.
So, Lucas, you are on the Cisco DNA Spaces team. And I kind of spoilt my hook, which I was going to ask the audience, what is the biggest indoor location services platform in the industry? And obviously, the answer is Cisco DNA Spaces. Cisco's massive. You have a huge amount of power. I think it's a real interesting comment on this space that we work on, that Cisco's decided to build the platform. So tell us, what is DNA Spaces?
Sure, Steve. So you can think about DNA Spaces, and maybe we zoom out to the 30,000 foot level here. So at the core, we're an outcomes cloud, right? We support the line of business, OT, facilities. So we support them and IT to achieve business outcomes, right? Now we do this through really a great indoor location or location cloud and an IoT services kind of portion of that, like marrying these two things together, both Wi-Fi and IoT, and through, I'd say a very kind of robust and focused partner ecosystem with devices and applications. So, but at the core of it, we're trying to bridge this world between IT, line of business, OT, et cetera, so that, I think you've said in the past, we can converge that physical and digital space to achieve outcomes.
And what are the features and functions of DNA Spaces? It's something that, as a Cisco customer, I don't have to have. Is that correct? Why would I want it? What would I do with it?
Yeah, so let me divide this up in maybe two parts. I'll try to be concise, and I may say this later on in the podcast, and I may not be concise, but I apologize. All right, so let's say one category is around the types of outcomes we're delivering, okay? So there's kind of three items here to talk about. So the first one is around location services. So this is the kind of traditional Wi-Fi type of services you may expect. And we marry this concept of back to business in that. So think about, using your access points as a sensor to understand behavior of people in the space. And then also using those access points as a way to bring folks back to business. So, all the way from saying, and we have this set up in our like in Cisco offices, saying this is how many people are in a space at this time, right? And if it goes over a certain threshold, we alert the business or maybe people on site to other kind of like use cases where we're able to say, hey, if someone self-reports, these are the people that may have been around. These are not the people, but these are the devices that were in that area in time and space. So there's a lot you can do simply with the access points that are already there, a ton. That's the first bucket. The second bucket is around IoT services. So we call it indoor IoT services. And this is, and we may get into this kind of in the future, but this is essentially creating a framework where any device that is in this framework and in the ecosystem can enable any application, right? So you may have a device, let's say from Contact.io, that measures temperature. Now, in the old world, so let me just say this. In the old world, you would have some proprietary technology stack, like this device talks to this gateway, talks to this application, right? And if you're IT or you're the line of business, if you want to do asset tracking, I have to buy this stack. And then next month I want to do occupancy, I got to buy this stack, right? And then as you add outcomes, you got to buy more and more stacks. So what we're doing in IoT services is we're saying, look, you have a layer that's devices. Okay, you have a layer that's middleware. You have a layer that's applications. So going back to contact, let's say we have a contact IO beacon. It measures temperature. Let's say it may measure humidity, right? Any application can use this device, right? And in the middleware, we do that kind of connection between the app and the device. We have like security and privacy kind of frameworks. We can manage multiple types of vendors here. So that's the second category, is around enabling this many-to-many architecture, creating a solution that's lower total cost of ownership, easier to deploy, easier to scale, monitored, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so that's the second piece around IoT services. And then that third piece is around onboarding. So we call it next generation onboarding. We've had a great world-class captive portal, the best captive portal out there. And you go to a hotel, how do you get on? You get on through the captive portal.
So this is the thing. So we go to connect to the Wi-Fi, and before we get onto the Wi-Fi, a page pops up, and that's coming from Cisco DNA Spaces. Yeah,
like us. Yeah, just real quick. So we're doing other things around making it easier to connect to the network, right? So we have something called open roaming. It's a new standard so that users can automatically onboard into a network. We work with carriers so that you go from cellular to Wi-Fi, and then we have an SDK that you can put in an application. So if let's say you're a retail brand and you have an app that your customers are using, when they walk into the store, you automatically get on the network. So those are kind of the three buckets of value, or that first category. Any questions there, Steve? I know I was not concise. I apologize.
No, it was very informative. I want to just understand or clarify. So this is optional, right? But it does cost something. What are we talking here? Obviously, your customers range from, we're about to expand our offices in San Diego, and I'm thinking, we should look at this because we need to start putting some structure in place. But Wiliot's still a startup. Is this something that's affordable for a startup, or is it only for very large enterprises?
I mean, it runs the range. Is it affordable? I would say yes. I think there's a ton of value that we're delivering, right? And it really depends on the use cases that you're looking at. So if Williot wants to do some space occupancy use cases, if they want to do, you all have expensive lab equipment, I'm sure, some asset tracking, it really depends on what you're trying to achieve, and the ROI, right, of that, and coming back down to how much you're going to pay. And we do have bundles, we have different types of pricing and all that stuff. So we usually get to a good spot with customers. Yeah.
And how is it structured? So I'm not going to ask you for an absolute amount, but is there a horizontal bit and then optional modules? Tell us a bit about that packaging. So
we have 3 tiers or 3 different subscriptions. So we have something called C. C is this is a tier. It's usually the least expensive, or it is the least expensive. It's included in most of our bundles. This gives you insights into how people are moving within the space, right? A lot of the insights that you can glean from wireless. We have something called Detect and Locate that helps with identifying where things are. Open roaming's included in that, and a few other things. The second kind of the tier in this the subscriptions is Extend. So we have we deal with partners a little bit differently than other folks in the industry. We have our partner framework has different elements, we have something called a Firehose API. So it's a streaming API. It's really built for IoT and a ton of events coming through it. It's built for scale, literally. And you can get wireless events, temperature events, occupancy events, a bunch of different stuff in the same Firehose. We monitor partner applications and the data stream. So, generally, I think what happens is a partner gets an API, and then everybody kind of walks away and say, okay, the job's done. right? Like for DNA Spaces, and we can talk about partnership and like how I think our team's super passionate about it, but we want to help support the entire use case. And that means that, we are able to see that data flow from the customer premise all the way to the partner app. We monitor the partner application. That's something we work out with partners, so we know if it's working, if it's not working. And then we're able to actually notify customers if something goes down. We're proactive about it. We triage with the partner. So it becomes a combined effort to support use cases. But anyway, access to kind of the Firehose API, the partner ecosystem, it sits in that extend tier. And then the third one is called Act. And this is where we're helping deliver outcomes to customers, either with native DNA Spaces applications, through IoT. And so there's a ton that sits in Act, all the way from some of the onboarding things I mentioned, to asset location, to all of this kind of awesome IoT ecosystem we're building out.
So you mentioned native apps and you've talked about partners. I think that's where some of the biggest questions are likely to be from our listeners and viewers. A lot of them work for startups and larger companies that are in this space, and I think some of them may be a little scared when they hear that you are offering a lot of things that sound like the things that they offer too. Are you competing with these startups or not?
I look, you asked me, I'm going to tell you absolutely not. So here's, Steve, we talked about this before. So I think you're smiling because I'm about to get on my soapbox. So let me just put this out here. I think the first thing is that this IoT and location services market, relative to what it can be, I think it's a small pie, right? And how I see my job and the team I work on, right? In DNA Spaces, it's way more than just me. All the success is attributed to others, and I'm a minor part of that. I want that to be very clear.
Well, and just what is your role? Tell us a little bit, just briefly.
Yeah.
You're doffing your hat to other people, but let's figure out where you fit in.
Yeah. So I'm product manager. I have a few folks on my team, and what we're primarily responsible is the partner ecosystem. So our application partners, consumers of data, delivering use cases, our IoT device marketplace, essentially generators of the data, right? And then also IoT services as it sits inside kind of the DNA Spaces platform. I also work on other projects in terms of what's new on the roadmap, what's coming up, helping execute on these to get it to invalidate the concepts, right? To get them to market readiness. And I do a few other things. Yeah, that's my role in a nutshell.
Very good. Thank you. So back to my provocative question, is Cisco declaring war on all the partners in this space? And you claim no. And I believe you.
Okay, good. All right. So I think, so the pie can be much bigger. I think no one's going to disagree with that. So let's come back to the question of why is it a small pie? Here's our thesis. It's a small pie because location services, IoT services, it's a hard problem, right? It's tough to scale it, okay? And for our partners, it's tough to support it. This has been kind of repeatedly told to me, different versions over the past 2.5 years, 2 years. So what we want to do as Spaces, we want it to make it easier for our partners to play in the market, right? We want to reduce support costs, reduce COGS, more access to customers, a better customer experience, all these different things. So, and if I'm measured on one thing from my boss, it's the success of our partners, right? Lucas, how are our partners doing? I mean, I hear that every week, right? So anyway, so coming back, so do we compete? No. We do believe that this is not a zero-sum game. The pie will grow, and we see it as our mission to enable partners both on the application side and on the device side to be successful. Now, will there be will we negotiate? Will we talk? Will we find common ground? Of course, right? I think that you have a ton of companies out there who have been in this space for a very long time, and they kind of play in the same space that we do. Now, to be honest, especially in the IoT side, like being the middleware is a huge pain for people. I mean, this is what, again, I've heard this quite like the margins on gateways are small. There's services around cable pulls. It's expensive. It's hard to scale. Like there's a ton of problems there. That's the beauty of Cisco being in this space, is like our infrastructure is already in place. You don't have to do any cable pulls, right? You don't have to do any of that. We're already there. And so we naturally fit in. So I mean, in my mind, we want partners absolutely to be successful, and we'll work with you every day to do that. On the application side, or sorry, Steve, I keep talking. I'll pause.
No, that's great. So your central said a lot of things, but one of the key things that I absolutely support and agree with is IoT as a category has really underperformed, and we shouldn't be thinking about market share. We should be asking ourselves, why is this market, which is about connecting everything in the digital world with everything in the physical world, it should be ginormous, and it's really pretty small. And I think you put your finger on the problem, which is infrastructure. Infrastructure is really hard. And fortunately, you guys have a massive market share. I don't know whether you're allowed to or know what the market share you have is between Catalyst and Meraki, but it's pretty ginormous, isn't it?
It's massive. It's massive, yeah.
So if we can leverage that and ride that, we can scale faster. And that's the thing that everyone cares about, I think.
I agree. And we talk about these proprietary stacks. Like, look, we will have applications that do some things, but we're never going to go super deep in the vertical. Like we may have an app that shows you where this thing is on a map, right? But we're not going to create an app, let's say in healthcare, that has, EHR integrations that meets JCO standards that, look, there are other people out there that spend every day of their life trying to solve these problems for a specific user type. They are best positioned to solve the problem. We're best positioned to enable them.
Mm-hmm. So it's really clear how a device company like Contact.io fits in, because you guys don't make those little beacons that they make, and they have some very specialized hardware that goes beyond what the access point can do. And we had their chief revenue officer on. It's actually the episode that's just gone out before this one. And he certainly made a very good case for what you just described from his side of it. The thing that's less clear to me is where the middleware players fit in. And I think you made a very good case for the vertical applications. Cisco's not going to have something that's focused on, drug trials or adherence monitoring or things like that. How does a company like Pointer Labs fit in? Because they're fairly horizontal, as I understand it, but you seem to have them on the platform as well.
Yeah, and with Pointer, I mean, I think we have a great. I don't know if you've had like Ege on the podcast, but we got a great relationship there too. So, if we look at Pointer, for example, this is really where we can do some cool stuff. So with Pointer, what we're doing is, and not just Pointer, like we're beginning with Pointer, but any navigation company has access to this. We've created an API for a location anchor API essentially, and in this API, a partner can pull in location of the beacon, UUID, major, minor, transmission levels, and some other things. So we can work with a company like Pointer, right? And we can reduce the amount of services that they have to set a customer up, because we can programmatically get them that information, which they may typically have to send somebody on site to do, right, around the fingerprinting. So, this is, I think, a great example of where we worked with the company and we were able to kind of figure out how to add value to them kind of through the middleware.
Very good. And what about discovery of those applications that are sitting on your platform? Do you see yourselves as an app store? How do I figure out whether a given partner works with DNA Spaces, and what does that relationship look like?
Yeah, great question. So we do have an app. It's a DNA Spaces App Center. You can go through there and see the app. I think we have about 45 apps in there, maybe around 50. We do have a product manager who's laser focused on like app partner success, making sure that they get in the app center, that they're successful after they're in there. And it's a similar to any other app center you're going to see: description, screenshots. These are the use cases that the app partner does. And something that's also kind of cool about it is, again, unlike other folks in the industry, you can actually activate the app directly through the cloud, right? So you don't have to get into an appliance. You don't have to send somebody on site. It all happens click, click, click. The app is activated, data sending.
Very good. Okay, another area for people that have followed Cisco, which a lot of people have. How does all this relate to CMX? What was CMX, and how does CMX relate to this?
Great question. So just think of so I mentioned the acquisition of July Systems. So when July Systems was acquired, they brought with it a ton of things, one of it being like a very mature, very robust location cloud. It had been around, I think, for maybe 10, 11 years, maybe longer, right? One of the first cloud services on AWS. So a ton of experience there. Now, CMX, on-premise, appliance, piece of hardware, this capability was subsumed by DNA Spaces. You can think about it that way. So DNA Spaces you can call it an evolution. So CMX is still part of the DNA Spaces offering. The majority of the capability and kind of the future is in DNA Spaces, kind of proper through what we call like the connector. But CMX is still there, and just think of Spaces as an evolution of that.
And then, well, first of all, an observation, and then a final question about where DNA Spaces is going. As industry observers, we kind of look at these things, and it's clear that Cisco is not going away. As one of the few companies you can say has got a very secure future. But I think whenever anyone from the outside looks at a new program like this, they have to decide, well, is this, how long is this going to be around for? And even though Cisco's not going to disappear, maybe CMX Spaces might. But I was convinced that this is here to stay when I spoke to one of your sales guys, because I got a very clear impression that this is strategically important, and actually your sales force is comped on it. So there's a lot of things that Cisco sells that maybe are kind of seen as more discretionary in your sales team's portfolio, but it seems like there's a major emphasis on that. So I'm interested in anything you want to say to amplify that in terms of the future of DNA Spaces and what we should look for in terms of where it's headed.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for the opportunity. So, one thing that we want to do is increase we want to be able to, first and foremost, like our core competency, location services, continue to enhance that. Recently, the IoT services portion, right, to continue to, from a device side, expand that ecosystem, expand our partner ecosystem. These are all very important things to us. We are also, starting to expand the technology from an IoT perspective and the different sources of data. So, for instance, depending on when this podcast drops, in May, we'll be releasing a gateway for the switch. So that will now be able to work with wired PoE devices, other kind of wired IoT sensors, even like video. So we'll bring that functionality into Spaces. And then, I would look for next fiscal year, or, the second half of this calendar year, for us to be continue to doing more in the IoT space, right? More different types of technologies, different use cases that we'll meet. And all this is a partnership with device vendors, with application partners, right? It's not just us. We work with the ecosystem to make it better, right? And so,
very good.
And we're here to stay. Okay, Steve. So we'll be around.
I believe that, and I'm sure you'll have lots of interesting partners joining the program, and it sounds like there's some pretty cool functionality as well. Lucas, thanks very much for spending time with us. I have really enjoyed the conversation. I hope that people will continue to listen. We took some time out one-on-one to talk a bit about your background and how you got to where you got to. So, Lucas, thanks again.
Thanks so much, Steve. Thank you.
And thank you, all of the viewers, listeners, subscribers. We really appreciate it. Please do tell your friends, rank us on your favorite source of discovering podcasts. I want to thank Nelson Hernandez, who edits this show, Jesse Hazelrig, who is our producer. And I also want to thank Starbucks, who are not a sponsor, but they do provide a job for my son, who's on the spectrum. He's 21 years old, and before Starbucks came along, he didn't have a job, and now he just loves working at Starbucks. So I'm going to say thank you to Starbucks. Thanks again to all of you for tuning in. I'd love to hear about 3 songs that are meaningful to you. As opposed to, forget the Mars thing. We used to ask people about the trip to Mars. So you can either disregard that change of context or consider it. But let's start our discussion off with talking about music. Lucas, what 3 songs are meaningful to you?
Great question, Steve. Okay, the first one is the General by Dispatch. So I went to West Point, and when I was in college there, one of my colleagues, a fellow cadet, had passed away at the end of I think it was at the end of like a marathon or a really long run, right at the end of it. And we got in a bus, we went to the funeral. I'm sorry, again, I apologize to make this sad, but during the funeral, they played that song, and that's just the song that, and I was in the military, and, it really resonates and it has meaning. And even like the message, kind of resonates with me, bringing it back to like what's important in life almost, and how you, and I'm not saying like the band Dispatch is like a leadership, like a thought leader and leadership and management, but just kind of like even in the lyrics a little bit, the selflessness and that attitude. So that's one song. Too long on that one song. That's a fantastic choice. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Let's see. The second one is Float On by Modest Mouse. So this is another one that helps me put stuff in perspective. And I don't know, sometime again during, I guess college was a really formative time in my life where you just put that song on and you can just, again, come back to kind of what's clear and what's important. And honestly, even, I deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, obviously been in stressful situations since then. And that's just always something that you put on and you kind of like, it's okay. Like there's other things, there's other things in life. So that's that one.
I've always thought that military experience must be such an incredible foundation for people that are working in high tech. Because I think working in high tech, everyone's running 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's pretty stressful. But then I think, because I work with a lot of people in Israel, where pretty much everyone that I work with has been in the military, and when we're working in a time crunch or there's a lot of competing things, I think about that, and then I think about my colleagues who have literally driven tanks over landmines. And I think, wow, this is just nothing compared to that. This is just nothing.
I think it's a great point. I think it's a good point, Steve. I think like there's two pieces to that, right? I think like item number one, you can always be like, well, at least no one's shooting at me, right? Like at least I'm not in Iraq or wherever you're at. Like check the box there, right? It could be worse. And 99.99% of the time, there's gonna be no loss of life, no loss of limb, right? You may lose a bunch of money, you may lose, a customer may be unhappy, but you can recover. Everything's recoverable. Just the second piece here is like, and I know the business you're in, right? Where there's some things that you're doing that supports the livelihood of people, and the same thing in spaces. Some of the use cases that we support, like infant protection, for example, or employee safety, like those are serious. So the other side of this is like you have a perspective on very serious things, and you can bring that intensity and I think like rigor to these situations and help and articulate that to the people who may have not been in these situations before.
Amazing. So first two choices down. What was the third one that you had in mind?
So the third song, it's the Over the Rainbow. The artist, he's a Hawaiian artist. I forget his name. But so we played this song at my wedding with my wife, which we had in Hawaii. It's while I was stationed in Hawaii. It was terrific.
Amazing.
And then, we had it again. My father recently passed away. And, we also played it then because he spent a lot of time in Hawaii and he really enjoyed it. So I think those are kind of three like super meaningful songs. Otherwise I got a very eclectic taste.
Really?
So I like pretty much everything. Yeah.
I feel the same way. I probably have a bit of a shallow spot with regard to country music, but pretty much everything else. Although I like Lyle Lovett, and there's a few other bluegrass things that I guess that's a relative of country music. Excellent. So, how did you get? Well, first of all, how did you end up in the military? You were in there for a while, like 6 years or something like that. How did you end up there? Yeah,
so this is just my personality. So it was senior year of high school. We had a recruiter from West Point come, and he kind of put everything out in front of me, and it was cool, right? And and essentially in my mind, this is irrational, but it was like this is the hardest thing I could do at the time. And that's just kind of my personality is I will generally, out of the options, one of the things I wait on is like the complexity, the challenge of it, right? And so that's why I ended up going to West Point in the first place. And then, being at West Point and just being with like kind of those caliber of individuals who had a similar kind of mindset and drive. I really enjoyed my time there. Obviously made some great, lifelong relationships, and that kind of propelled me into the military for 6 years.
And from West Point to Iraq to Cisco, and Cisco is obviously an incredibly important company, a lot of power and position, and pretty ubiquitous, dominates its segment. And you're working on DNA Spaces, which I think in itself is very important in this area that we focus on, which is the convergence of physical and digital. I like to ask our guests how they got their job, because I think a lot of us who kind of observe the industry, it's fascinating to understand how people got to where they got to. How did you get from West Point to Iraq to being this key member of the DNA Spaces team?
Yeah, I'll try to tell this as concisely as I can, but I think there's some kind of cool parts of the story. So in 2012, I transitioned out of the military, right? And I got a role with Kaiser Permanente in San Francisco. In my younger mind, great location, good salary, aligns with my skill set. Fast forward, I go to San Francisco, and the dollar doesn't go so far there. It goes even less far now. So anyway, I worked in Kaiser for a couple of years, learned quite a bit, and honestly, like a great team there that we worked with, and we were doing really, I think, fantastic things. It was in clinical technology. From there, I went to the business school, so University of San Francisco, and really my goal coming out of the business school that I thought was, hey, go join a startup, do something that's small. Fortuitously, during that, first and second year, I had a friend that had we deployed together in Iraq. And I always like telling this story because it really kind of like brings to light the power of a network and, who and why all this stuff is important. And so, he had gone to Cisco to interview for an internship. He had gone to a few other companies as well. He ended up taking another offer, and he said, "Hey, Lucas, I have this. The hiring manager is asking me if I know anybody." Right now, about a week or two previous to that, I'd listened to some speaker, and the speaker, she said, be able to tell people what you want to do. Like, it can be a 60, 70%, 80% solution, but tell people how they can help you. And so that's, I had that conversation with my buddy. It was like, this is what I want to do. So when the hiring manager asked him, do you know anybody? He's just like, I know the guy, right? Because I had been articulate about what I wanted to do. And by happen chance, I interviewed, I got the internship, and then that kind of transferred into a full-time role at Cisco. In 2016, I started there. And I started in a job rotation program. So it was for MBA grads coming out and wanting to become a product manager. I started in a strategy role, and this is like, ex McKinsey, ex BCG, Bain, Strategy, and for me, that was super formative because I wasn't great with slides. I have a lot of like execution experience and executing, really good at that. But, hadn't had a lot of development around strategy and really the rigor associated with strategy. I mean, it's not just, the porters and it's not frameworks. It's actually getting in the weeds and doing hard work. And so I did that for about a year and a half. And then I went into a position in enterprise routing where I worked on edge compute and some of the virtualization.
But just, I'm going to hit the pause button here because I'm interested in the strategy role. So it sounds like you joined a bunch of management consultants who are part of Cisco. What are they doing in Cisco? What's the role of that team?
Yeah, so I mean, Cisco has, in every function, super, super smart people, right? And I think that you'll probably find this in a lot of large companies. You'll have people who come from these backgrounds that can help, structure problems well, help, research these problems well, help communicate them well, back to the business, right? And so that, the business has a good understanding of the market, of opportunities, of everything that comes with the strategy kind of role, right? So it was a great team. And, I don't know where everybody is today. It was a few years ago, but it was really good.
Very good. I interrupted you. How you went from there, and what's that last step?
Okay, so the last step, and this is, again, it's like being clear with what you want, right? So in the program I was in, every year you rotate into a new job, and you have an idea of what you want to do for your own growth and for the company, what interests you. And obviously, like the company, Cisco in this case, has a set of positions. So going into my third year, I had a very clear kind of idea of what I wanted to do. And it was, I want to do something where I can deliver value quickly. right? I can iterate quickly on customer feedback and get that back. Typically, you'll find this in products that are like cloud delivered, right? It's just the nature of the cloud. And I wanted to do something new, something from 0 to 1. And I had this mentor, and she's a friend as well, but she helped out with the program. And I told her this, and she's like, I know the perfect person for you. And so at the same time, Cisco was going through an acquisition with July Systems. And this team eventually kind of became DNA Spaces. Mm-hmm. So the founder of July Systems, Rajesh Reddy, my mentor, she had a call with him that day or the next day. And she said, Lucas, just take my slot. Just take my slot. You can talk to Rajesh. And
generous.
Yeah, very generous. And so I spoke with him. We had a chat. And I think he, obviously I'm on the team today, so he liked it or he needed a warm body, one of the two. And it's kind of fortuitous, right? And it was because I think part of it was, you have a network. Again, I don't come from a background. My bachelor's degree is in philosophy. I have a philosophy bachelor's of science from West Point. I mean, come on, maybe not the best decision looking back, but I did it. But I was kind of clear with what I wanted, and people helped me. And this is kind of how I got into the role, and just been moving forward and executing since. Yeah.
So a couple of questions. I want to come back to the philosophy thing in a second, but you mentioned you had a mentor. Is this part of is that like a formal role at Cisco, or did you just decide that this person was going to be your mentor? What was the deal there?
No, so Cisco, I do believe they have a formal mentorship program, mm-hmm. But in this case, I had gone through some challenging times before, mm-hmm. Just for my own self-development, and this lady had helped me quite a bit, and kind of during the course of that, we developed a mentor-mentee relationship, and it just happened, I think, and it turned out well.
Very good. And this philosophy idea, I noticed that in your bio, and I've actually met a few people in the technology business who've got that philosophy background, and I think it's very relevant. I mean, in technology, we're dealing with a lot of abstract concepts. It requires acuity of mind, and it seems like philosophy is the purest channel of study where you hone those mental skills. And at the end of the day, what we do is all about using your mind. So I don't see any contradiction at all there. I'm just interested in how you feel like your time studying philosophy has helped you, or has it not? Maybe it's been, maybe it was completely recreational?
No, I mean, at the time it wasn't recreational. I thought I would need it one day for a job. But no, I'd say that I think clear thinking, right? So there's a few superpowers I think of, and like clear, structured thinking is one of them. And this really, obviously in college and going through philosophy, there's a lot of logic. There's a lot of like, how do you construct an argument that's sound? How to use, there's a lot of this. It really kind of came to light whenever I went into that strategy role, because you have to clearly think about the problems and structure those problems, in an organized fashion. And the toughest thing I think in technology sometimes, because you're right, we're dealing with like abstract concepts in very ambiguous situations. I think in our market, it's even a bit more ambiguous because while the technology has been here for a long time, I still think the market is fairly, there's a long ways it can go. There's so much potential. So being able to take an ambiguous situation, sort that, structure it, clearly think about it, and then create like a plan to execute on it. I mean, I'm not great at it, but I think that's something that, is valuable as a skill set. And whether the philosophy degree was part of it or not, I mean, it certainly, I don't know, it probably helped. I don't know.
I'm guessing it did. Very good. Well, Lucas, thanks so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Steve.